very, very dry winter season where we pretty much only talked about Onimai and then like a handful of other things.
Oh, yeah.
A very dire season.
It was very dire.
We're back and we have the opposite. We have too much crap to talk about, so...
A good problem to have.
We're going in order from basically the general least favorite to most favorite. And we're basically just spoiling everything, so we gotta start with the unfortunate bottom of the totem pole here. Konosuba Megami version.
Spin-off bros, what happened?
This show is just like fundamentally screwed from the beginning.
I think the source material is probably fundamentally screwed, because it's just like...
So this is a full adaptation.
Yes, this is a full thing. I mean,
okay.
So you dropped it, so you didn't know, but it literally ends with Megumin joining the party with Aqua and Kazuma in it.
Really?
Yeah, it ends...
the very end of the very last episode.
Yeah, it literally ends where that episode of the first season begins.
Wow,
with her joining
it's like
them.
Rogue One.
Yep, it's the true Megu prequel that Megumin fans were dying for, I'm sure.
I feel like none of the Konosuba characters can hold up an entire season by themselves. Like, no matter who you put, like, because they're comedy characters, they're really not intended to be, like, fleshed out. And you can tell because pretty much this whole season is just kind of, like, meandering. Like, he was like, I'm going to write something for Megumin, and then he just didn't have any ideas at all.
And she has her backstory mentor.
Yeah, she did. They had to give her like a mentor character to like inspire her to learn the explosion magic. They felt like compelled to come up with like an actual like non-joke adjacent backstory. Her fixation didn't need a reasoning. Like there didn't need to be some like grand like awe-inspiring like personal moment for her to be like, damn, now I gotta learn this shit. It's just like it could have just been spontaneous. I don't know if I was really expecting like a big thing. And so they have to come up with all this, and then they have to come up with the whole like Megumin even getting enough points to get explosion and the whole magic school shit. It's like the only characters that I cared about were like already like established ones, which was like Yunyun and Megumin's sister, like Komeko. They first off, I mean, Union was like obviously a huge part of this anime on purpose, even though it like very much contradicts her introduction later. They really couldn't. They knew that Megumin did not have enough star power to be bouncing off of fucking randos the entire anime.
They tried.
They
tried.
I mean, them trying was like the shitty like stalker guy. You know, at that point, like the halfway point where she finally leaves the village, I was just like, that was like my relief point where it was like, oh my god, now there's something different happening. They introduced this new character, Cecily, who I think actually shows up in normal Konosuba later, but I've actually not read that far, so I don't know. She's like she's an Axis cult girl with like blonde hair, and her and Megumin get like a rapport, even though obviously like she's a freak like the rest of them. And naturally, like even then, the writing was not confident enough to let Megumin bounce off of these people alone, so they brought Yunyun back again. And this is a very persistent thing, as Yunyun doesn't ever really go away. Which is not a complaint. In fact, it's maybe the only thing that saved this anime from being like really pointless and terrible. Especially after the Crimson Demon Village, where they start having this kind of like buddy cop chemistry, where like sometimes something funny happens with them. Those were like the only parts of the anime that really like kept me going. Like everything else was just like, all right.
Magical Destroyers. I saw one episode of this one, and I was like, okay, this show seems a little bit goofy.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's establish the baseline here. Because Junin Inagawa, the guy, the man, the person who brained all of this into reality, not your average creative mind, because this guy is, he grew up in San Diego, which is not in Japan, it's in California, and Junin Inagawa's early shit was him working with, like, skater culture and shit. I think he's worked with, like, I don't know, like ASAP Rocky. I think him and like ASAP Rocky are friends. He's got friends in the rap game. He's done a lot of designs for them, and he was working in that sect. But he's also like a big like Akiba culture nerd. I think he went to Akiba when he was like 11 or something, and I guess that woke him up. I think the funniest thing I read in an interview was the thing that got him into like that otaku like aesthetic bit was like he talked about the first manga he ever read, and it was fucking Kiss X Sis. I read that in an interview. I'm like, God damn, no wonder it's like this, man. It's just like that's what you're stemming from. Like, you know what, man? Whatever. Let's see it. And so magical destroyers. I mean, the whole thing. I'll say the one thing that I really liked was the music. The music is actually really good. Like, actually, might have been the best OST out of any anime this season. I feel like Kill la Kill was there was a big influential undercurrent with that anime and this particularly. Especially when you have like a character like Blue who like feels like they were pulled from a Trigger anime, like that like panty and stocking-esque like raunchiness, you know, and like goofball shit, and her like stalking Hime cut, you know, like the whole thing. Like you could feel the pieces of the influences he's pulling from, and it's not necessarily a bad thing inherently, but it's definitely reflective of just like how very conflicted this entire like concept and idea was in execution. I want to give him almost the benefit of the doubt because like this guy's like younger than all of us. Like this dude's like in his early 20s. Like he's not. Oh wow. He's like very young for someone.
And look at us.
To be getting like a passion project in this industry, like that's just like you don't usually get like 22-year-olds getting their like passion project out into the world. So it was like knowing that, like watching most of the second half, it was just like, you know what, like you just throw your ideas, man, and I'll just ride it out and see what happens.
I wasn't even gonna watch this at first because it looked like shit. I'm gonna be honest.
No, I mean, it's
what kept you hooked?
I mean, obviously the OP was like, you know, was posted around because it's pretty good. ED as well, and I was like, you know, people are just gonna watch this for the opening. I'm like, it's probably not good. I'm not gonna watch it. But then when like episode 4 was out or something, I started watching it. I don't think I should have done it.
You know, they were going for that whole like Akiba culture vibe. It reminded me of fucking like the Akiba's Trip anime almost, which was similarly kind of wacky and had that same sort of like otaku Akiba culture focus thing going on.
It reminded me of the one where like porn is banned.
Oh, Shimonetta. It does have some of that, like in the sort of like big boys scanning for otaku and quote unquote saving them.
It's literally 1984.
Yeah, it was really funny for me because I did see the opening before I started watching it, but I knew who directed the opening because I had seen a very similar opening to it. It was done by the same guy who did the opening to Vlad Love, which was Mamoru Oishi's like super duper like full creative control project that was like funded not like a normal production committee. There was like this whole like twist on it where like him and the fucking co-director, who I always forget his name, but I remember he's the dude who did Glass Lip, which is like the funniest thing in the world to me. They co-directed that together, and they both had like complete creative control over the entire process. There was no like production oversight. They just let these two old men like whack out this fucking anime. And it was similar because like they had two openings. And both of them were really fucking good, and they had like great animation, and like they were just like visually captivating and interesting. I don't think this guy did both of them. I think he only did one of them because it has the same like blue fish motif in it that the Magical Destroyers opening has. Magical Destroyers wasn't as brain rattling. I just don't really know what they wanted to do with this. I know this is supposed to be, I guess, like, this is supposed to be, like, a prequel or, like, an origin story to this entire, like, otaku hero universe. and not even the
Yeah, it's
mobile
like
game, because
for-
that mobile game's
Oh.
getting shut down. So it's already hit end of life. I think it's just like
Really?
yeah, it's already hitting end of life.
Oh my god.
So I'm
Oof.
I'm pretty sure that it's just sort of like a prequel to whatever is in like Inagawa's head. Like it's just like the story that's in his brain. It's the prequel to whatever that is, and no one knows what that is except for him. It's interesting that anyone jumped to agree to produce this, and I think it's interesting that anyone jumped to agree to do like a multimedia type project with it with the mobile game, among other things. I guess it just goes to show Inagawa definitely has some sway. He must have contacts.
Insomniacs, after school, they sleep together? Wait, that's
Multiple
not
times.
right. I thought they were Insomniacs. Okay, so I only saw one episode of this one. I already had a lot of romance stuff on my plate, so I was like, I'm passing this one. But what even happens in this anime?
I just finished it like 10 minutes ago.
I also finished it not that long ago. Insomniac Sister School is like, I liked it. I almost feel like I would have liked it more reading it. It was very saccharine. Weirdly enough, I think, because like they do talk about like, it's not like a very like super bubbly romance. Like they do have like interpersonal problems, and they work through like some more serious themes. And I don't think they did a bad job of incorporating those. They didn't feel like awkward or stiff in the way that they were.
There's some powerful moments.
Incorporated, yeah, and then there were definitely some hitters, when they were trying to go for that kind of mood. Like they definitely had a few scenes where they really went all in, and I felt like it was definitely for the better in terms of the experience. It's like I liked it, but I never like kind of like tipped past that. I think like it was always like consistently like enjoyable to an extent. And I mean, I enjoyed that. Obviously, there was some like very explicit romantic progress. As a lot of romance series that started from like 2019 onward, or in that zone where they're finally
nowadays we have some actual
no more
progress.
dicking around anymore. We're just gonna do real
exactly.
romance now, boys. And it's like cool. I like the characters. I thought Gonta was a pretty decent male lead. I didn't know how I'd feel about him early on, but I like that they made him kind of like vulnerable. I feel like you don't see a lot of male characters who are vulnerable in that kind of way.
Yeah, that was nice.
So he was definitely a lot more refreshing. Starting out like very bitter and distant from everyone, and then eventually like opening up, and being more emotionally vulnerable around people that he cares about. I definitely appreciated also how they developed Maguri as well. I feel like early on I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about her character. Like I didn't know if I was gonna feel like she was like very like conveniently here at first. Because it's just like how it's a very like traditional kind of romance, like boy meets girl
it's how it
type
usually
thing.
goes.
And you can't really judge it based off that, because that's just like, it's a good introductory narrative tactic for a romance like this. Like, what really matters is the meat of what comes after, so I could only just like predict, but they definitely they gave them a lot of good chemistry, and Maguri herself has a lot of good character moments that define her as well. So I felt like they were a strongly developed duo. With a pretty decent supporting cast. I loved Gonta's like friend from the student council, Ukigawa.
Yeah.
I loved him because he was just like a good dude. Like there was nothing to him other than like he's just a good friend who's just like legitimately just there for him. Like he's just like a good guy. Like there's no like complication to it. You don't always get just like good guy bro friends in a series like this. He's just like very straightforward and like very just
usually
like down
the bros
to earth.
are like perverts and all that.
Yeah, like usually
like,
they're just
stupid.
like they're like the offset. Like they've got like goofball personalities, but like you could tell like deep down they're supportive in a certain way. But Ukigawa was just like very very just average in the sense that
guy.
like his personality wasn't exaggerated or anything. He was just like a very like easygoing, like accommodating kind of dude, and then he was just like, it was very clear that like his friendship with Gonta was important to him, and I could sense that just through their interactions, and I liked that. It was like it was a lot more, their relationship was a lot more
nice.
subtle and nice, and I could appreciate that simplicity. Insomniacs is good at simplicity where it counts, and I think that's a big part of what helps the romance aspects be a lot more enjoyable because they don't go too hard on like the romanticization of how they depict certain things.
It's also pretty simple in the way that there's like no culture festival. There's like no big arcs. It's just like maybe a school trip or two.
Yeah, like the big school focus is all on like their club because that's like the whole like setup.
Yeah.
Of course, is like they go into the old abandoned observatory and then obviously they get caught and they can't stay there without a good reason, so they revive the astronomy club and use that sort of as a tool to get into staying there. But then eventually the astronomy part becomes a lot more important. So you get all this beautiful night sky imagery, a lot of that. I mean, scenery wise, looked really nice in general. Even during the day shots, they put a lot of effort into definitely establishing shots with some really nice, just gorgeous visual components. And once again, using that like simplicity, even in a visual sense, to just convey mood and to convey other information. And I felt like they did a good job. They stayed within a very consistent sort of baseline for how they were compositing a lot of things, and I liked it.
Maybe I would have liked it more if it wasn't the same season as two other shows.
As two other romance sort of focused shows. Yeah,
exactly.
It's just like, I had that same feeling where it's just like it's the most straightforward and the most saccharine of those.
It was relaxing. It was enjoyable.
It was a nice Monday watch. Yeah. How much Gundam have you watched like prior to this?
I've watched Witch from Mercury season 1 before season 2.
So you haven't watched any other Gundam thing, is what you're saying?
I've watched a few fights and a few openings.
Okay, so yeah, we were basically on the same level then going into this.
But I will watch it eventually.
So this was I assume a lot of people. Because Witch of Mercury kind of poised itself well as like an introductory type show. I feel like a lot of people, this was my first true Gundam experience, the whole 9 yards of it and everything. I enjoyed it. I definitely can see some of those like Gundam type writing narrative tools that like I've heard about get sort of incorporated in their own way in this setting. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters and a lot of situations.
Especially in season 2.
Yeah, season 2, like especially, was they had to like ramp up because like season 1 was very paced.
A lot of school life, except with like one exception at the end. It was pretty peaceful for the most part. There was some behind the scenes scheming.
You get some minor scheming. You get all the like Astakasha like dueling, of course, the whole duel arcs where that's happening very often.
Like, like Revolutionary Girl and Utena. Very, very similar. The bride and the uniform that you get if you're the groom, all that. They even have a little fencing part in the second season.
I remember the fencing part, and I I still haven't watched Utena yet, but I do know that scene. That's just one of those Utena scenes that I just like, I feel like people will see even if they don't watch it.
You have some similar characters as well. The Kendo guy. Similar things happen to him. Some things are like almost one for one. But there's enough differences, and obviously it's a bit shorter and a lot newer. And it has robots.
I also think it's definitely worth mentioning that same writer was also one of the co-creators of Code Geass. I feel like that sort of resonated with me because I could sort of tell, especially in like the more action-y segments, wasn't as like off the rails as Code Geass, but still had that like same kind of momentum feeling to it where like once shit started happening, it felt like shit was always happening. It was like constantly at full throttle down the hill. Like there was like really no breaks, and that was kind of like what the second season, like the second half felt like to me. It was like stuff was just happening and compounding and going, and things were just developing. And of course we had to see all these different perspectives, especially when you have like, Mirina and Guel going down to Earth, and then you've got like the other shit like fucking like Alan and Nika and fucking Noria, whatever her name is. in the fucking locked room together, and then
in the container, for 5 episodes.
Suletta's like cope arc going on, closer to like the school stuff. So like they just split these perspectives up and do a lot of balancing, which in the first season they didn't have to do a lot of that because a lot of it was very centralized at the school setting. So like when you get to that second season portion, like they really had to kick up the action and then split off the perspectives a lot. So we got a lot of those like episodes where we were only seeing like certain characters for the most part, and then we maybe see like a scene with like what other people were doing, but like it was really like they were like cycling through it for a while.
Yeah, Suletta didn't show up for like 2 episodes back to back at one point.
Was that like right after the whole like her losing the fight episode? Yeah, like she was in like stasis for a while they were like addressing like the Earth shit and like Gwell coming back to take over Jeter Corporation. Suletta was just sort of like off screen being sad, and it was like, well, there's like characters where like I really liked them and I really thought they did a good job of like establishing them, like Gwell. I think Gwell might have been my favorite character, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Just like I loved his episodes, I loved his focus, I just loved his character development. He had good characters to bounce off of him and surround him, so he had a lot of good chemistry with the cast in general.
He definitely had it the worst at times, which helps that wanting him to succeed.
Yeah, he was at a pretty dang low point, especially during like the daddy issues arc, the Bob arc. I liked Ellen, and I liked. I mean, the concept of his character was obviously like partially foreshadowing for like Suletta's whole deal, like establishing the, like the genetic clones and all that.
There was a lot of parallels between to show that.
Yeah, and they tried to do. Yeah, they definitely did that very purposefully. It's like very clear why Ellen and Suletta sort of have that like build up in the first season. And then when that sort of separates to go towards the whole Ellen clone thing and all that spreading out, like it sort of ties back later. But
what this show is also really good at is there's a lot of foreshadowing for the big Suletta twist, the Aries stuff. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's totally manageable to piece the whole thing together if you pay attention to every little thing. There's a lot of like offhand mentions, like some dates don't match up, and it detects multiple signatures in one scene. There's all that kind of stuff I thought was done pretty well. It's always nice to have that.
Yeah, they definitely laid the groundwork where it seems like everything that was building up to that was definitely giving out all the information necessary for the viewer to sort of piece that together if they so wished to do so. The general like narrative structure I was pretty satisfied with. I thought as far as conclusions go it was solid enough, right? I didn't know exactly what they were gonna do when we got to like the Quiet Zero stuff. I was like, well, how are they gonna stick this one out? How are they gonna land this one? And there were definitely some pretty good moments in that whole stretch there leading up to the ending. So I thought it definitely was able to stand on its own legs at the end.
There's a ton of Gundam action. Almost all of it is hand-drawn. There's very little CGI Gundams, which is, I don't mind CGI, but it's impressive. But also there's a very, very intense action scene towards the end in Quiet Zero, which doesn't involve Gundams. I think you know which one I mean. It's the encounter between like Miorina's group and Lady Prospera. I thought that was very intense and a very good scene.
It was like it was a great like in-person action scene. There was a lot of tension. Like they established like a very good room for them to be fighting in because there's like a lot of cover and a lot of like shit obstructing each other. And this is that like pressure, with them trying to access the terminal and everything. And like it definitely had that sort of like action movie type pressure to it, which was nice. I thought that was fun. It definitely gave it a bit more spice, even outside of just the Gundam battling itself.
Overall, I'd say pretty nice show. I liked it quite a bit. The 2 cores, they wanted a finale for the first one that's very shocking. So maybe if it was like 2 cores back to back, it could have been rearranged a little so the second half wouldn't be as quick. But overall, I'm happy with the end product.
If its mission statement is to be like a good introductory point for newer fans to get into the Gundam series, I think it accomplishes that.
I was always planning on watching the original, but now I'm definitely more likely to do it sooner rather than later.
Right, and I feel like it's one of those things where like there's like components and aspects in the way like the narrative is structured and how certain characters are written where you'll go back and watch older stuff and you'll start to see which Mercury was like pulling from in Gundam's history. You'll start to see that kind of like those motifs pop up and you'll be able to like appreciate those retroactively.
Yeah, so we got another pretty straightforward romance show here, Bokuyaba.
Yes, Bokuyaba. Bokuyaba is written by Norio Sakurai, who I know for writing the much dumber and much goofier Mitsudomo, yes, which I have watched. So I was already familiar with her like writing style going into this, so I got through that like early part without like flinching too much because it was like, yeah, this is pretty much like what I expect from her. You got all your dumb early gags. You got the fucking monk dude who's like obsessed with the fat girl in their class.
I'm surprised they didn't. They never went back to that like after the first few episodes.
Yeah, my understanding is Hara, who is the chubby girl. She shows up a lot more later in the manga, but past like what the first season adapts. So she'll come back eventually for
Bokuyaba season 2
to have some more time in the limelight. But yeah, obviously we were focusing primarily on establishing the connection between our two leads, Anna and Ichikawa. I always forget his first name, but early on I enjoyed it, even like before I like started hitting the romance strides. Obviously you see those specks of like the sort of like directing style they're going in early, where you get those like the title drops during that like climactic moment of the episode and it plays like that music. I liked that too, and early on I was like, are they going to be doing this the whole anime? And the answer was yes, they were doing it the whole anime. But man, when you get to like the second half and they start like hitting the real fucking like impact moments, it's like you start hearing the music and you're like, oh my god, something's going to happen.
I watched the first 3 episodes. I thought it was really cringe, and I dropped it. After it was over, like I heard people talk about it every once in a while. It's like, oh, people are saying it's getting better and better. I saw some like screenshots and said, oh, this looks nice. And then there was a season 2 announcement, and I was like, you know what? I think this might have enough potential to go somewhere with 2 seasons, so I'll just watch it. And then I watched the last 9 episodes in like 3 days.
I find it funny, and I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy saying this because I've thought about this and it's just true. Ichikawa just starts as like male Tomoko, basically.
Yeah.
like loner who just silently judges their classmates all the time, has like a journal writing about how he's gonna like kill everyone. He's got the hair swoop covering one of his eyes. He's actually like incredibly shy. He's super perverted. Talks about like getting a boner all the time. I when the romance started kicking in, I really liked the way they interacted. I really liked those subtle changes in both characters, not just Ichikawa, but Yamada as well. Like, you could tell how they were influencing each other, like, very subtly, like, the more they interact over time. And I like the way that, like Yamada's circle, they become more prominent, and then they especially become more prominent when Ichikawa actually starts, like, talking to them and becoming acquainted with her friends. So, it was a nice, very gradual, very natural sort of, everyone sort of coming together as everyone's relationships sort of develop over time. And then really when she gets to those like last 4 episodes, it's just back-to-back bangers, like just real good, like every single time. Like, I was always
very, very good.
Like once you hit that point, like Bokuyaba was like definitely one of the anime I was looking forward to the most every week. And I was getting misty. I was getting misty at some of those scenes. I was like, oh man, they're getting me.
In terms of like trope of boring, creepy loser in school, not high school necessarily, and the most beautiful girl in the school completely falls for him. It's pretty common, but in terms of that, this is definitely the most like believable one. Like if you compare it to the cosplay one.
Oh yeah, fucking Dress Up Darling. Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and that was a big part of why I liked it as well. And it's because like even early on they established that like Yamada is not like a really like normal person either. Like she has her own like very specific quirks that even she like doesn't really like tell her friends about either. Like she's like relatively normalized in that sense, and obviously she does have like she is like conventionally attractive in a sense, but like her personality is definitely just like off just enough that it definitely makes sense, and you can see why her and Ichikawa
believable.
would be able to bond, because they are both like sort of abnormal in different ways, and that has like different effects on their social standing, but they see that and feel that connection out as they, you know, hang out in the library together and eventually actually hang out outside of that setting. Like, you can really feel the way that they mesh chemistry-wise, and it feels very natural.
Something I really liked is Ichikawa's family. Because they're like a normal family. When his sister showed up, I was like, she's gonna be like, oh, my fucking little brother, he's so cringe, I hate him.
Right.
He's so annoying. You know, that's what I expected. But no, she's just a normal sister. She likes him, she dotes on him.
He overthinks how his sister like acts all the time, and she's just like a pretty much a normal sister character.
One gag I thought was amazing with his sister. There's like, you can kind of see that they're very similar, but she's an adult, so you know she grew up a little bit. But you see, like in her yearbook, you see she's like a little gloomy kid as well. And then like when she finally meets Anna, there's like multiple times where she's like really weird and creepy kind of. And Ichikawa sees her and she's like, oh my fucking god, is this how I am?
It runs in the family. Another parallel. It's good.
Like, it actually made me laugh.
I like that episode too. It was good. It's a good one.
Doga Kobo coming back into the spotlight with the big anime from this season, Oshi no Ko. Since I didn't know the story ahead of time, it's really hard to tell like exactly what direction this show is gonna move in, because it seems like it's juggling like a whole lot of things at once. Like on top, like the whole murder mystery you think would be more prominent, but it's always just kind of lurking in the background. Like it's just slowly moving forward with every little event, every little arc we get, where like the dating show or the one manga live adaptation they're doing, it's always just one step closer to finding out what this murder mystery thing is all about. And meanwhile, within all that, we're like starting to form like a love triangle. You're getting all kinds of characters weaving into this, and it's like it's almost like we have like two main characters, because we have like the twins, Aqua and Ruby. It really is just juggling a whole lot, so it's surprising it manages to like keep everything moving, keep everything together, despite just how many different things it's throwing at the audience. Like just right away in the first episode, you have the whole like Ai getting stabbed, which is already a lot to take in, because it's like that's like referential to like a real world incident that would have happened like 2 years prior to him writing that.
Yeah, there's a lot of real world stuff he references in this series.
Again, it's really hard to predict like how it's going to move, because it does have this weird like love triangle property where it's like now she's starting to emulate Ai. Certain
characters are appealing to different parts of his psyche. Like obviously, like Akane, like emulating Ai is very much. That is specifically more calling to Goro than it is to Aqua, because he's like seeing her through like the admiration of Goro, the idol fan, and not like as Ai's son, Aqua. So like you could see the like way that his mental shift happens when like the different parts of his psyche like get sort of like exposed to those different elements. Because then there's Kana, and Kana really like specifically appeals to Aqua, the psyche, like Aqua's psyche specifically because of their experience in their childhood as child actors, and then later on reuniting. Like that's not something that the Goro psyche ever had experience with, but Aqua does, and that's like those very fundamental difference in experiences. Like there's a lot of that inner struggle throughout the anime, which I thought was probably the more interesting part of his character.
And then on top of juggling all these different characters and everything, they're also trying to like give like an insider look into the basically just the entertainment industry in general. They're really peering into a bunch of different parts of that industry, where it's like you have the little idol festival at the end, and you're looking at the one like botched job manga adaptation where like the original manga author is just like,
Oh my
why?
God.
Why did you do this?
But she gets that nice little moment where the last episode is good, and then she like is happy that it happened at all, just to be able to see that
At
one
least I got
moment.
something, yeah.
Yeah, she got
The
some
manga's
closure.
over. I can't hope for anything good. The manga's over.
She gets
It's
that
how it is.
closure. She gets that closure.
You can't expect an amazing adaptation when there's no more manga to sell.
Even though there are a lot of like idol-centric anime in the last like 10 years or so, I don't think there's been like a real like any popular shows that have really focused like on this wide of a net of like how the inner workings work like in a believable way. They're also trying to cover modern stuff too with like we have like a YouTuber streamer girl in here.
Oshinoko does a good job of having self-contained arcs that will contribute to the like overall like narrative of the murder mystery and all that. But when you get into like those arcs, like it feels very like self-contained. Like you could really like experience them almost like divorced from everything else, and they would still have a very solid foundation. So you can like appreciate those things individually, and then when it gets back to like progressing like the Uber story, you kind of get back on that track, and then it takes you to sort of the next point, and then you go through that, and it does a good job of sort of back and forthing on that, where you can see that it's always moving towards progress, but it takes the time to stop and breathe for each like individual arc, so that you can get like the full breadth of what it's trying to show and say about that specific sect of things. And now we're going to go on to stage theater next, and then we're getting that aspect now.
The arcs aren't super long, but they're also not like only like 5 chapters. They have a pretty nice length for what they're doing, and like you said, they're pretty relatively self-contained, and it's always a new topic, kind of. Not obviously there's acting and music, and it's always like one of them is like a TV show, then a reality show, then a stage play. It's like there's a lot of variety.
Yeah, it's addressing like similar spheres of that industry, but showing that there definitely are a lot of different perspectives in the way those mediums are addressed, but also showing that like a lot of these things are interconnected from like a business standpoint, like a lot of the same kind of people and like producers like working behind the scenes, and like there's all that networking. It feels like there's a thread that's always being followed, even if it leads to sort of different sects of this industry. Like you could feel like the underlying current is very much very consistent throughout. So it gives you these different perspectives, but it always feels like it's running on the same wavelength of what it's trying to address. So it never feels like you're really, being jerked around or anything.
I like that they change up the different angles of the entertainment industry, because I think if it only focused on idol stuff for like the whole show, I think I would just get like bored of it. They're also introducing new characters by doing this, just like one at a time, and like certain characters will stick and certain characters just kind of fade away.
Even when I was skeptical, it managed to sort of sell me on what it was trying to do as things progressed.
The weakest part is probably the school stuff, because it doesn't look like any of the like school characters are gonna be important. Maybe like the model girl, she like Ruby befriends her, and then she shows up like a few episodes later, and that was it, and she doesn't really do or say anything. They realize that the school stuff is not really interesting, so
It's just like right away.
They just skip school the next time they go there.
It's like a tool to like bring these specific characters together in like a setting. Like it's just a means to an end. It's clearly not like a primary setting that really matters that much in the grand scheme of things.
They start like with like this grand entrance of, oh, this is the school with the most performance in the country, and then they don't meet anyone there.
They're like, we have too many characters.
Yeah.
I think maybe Akasaga didn't want to write another like school-centric setting.
Yeah, so PA Works continuing their streak. They did it again. They pulled it off again. They did another good show. 4 seasons in a row. This is like unheard of. And this is like arguably their best one too. Skip and Loafer. It is dense. Like in contrast to Bokuyaba, which like mainly just focuses on like the main couple of the show, Skip and Loafer is like constantly bouncing between this wide roster of characters, and they're focusing on the relationships between like so many combos of characters that they always have something new for every single episode to like, we're going to strengthen these two and then we're going to strengthen these two, and it doesn't really matter like how they're related to each other.
I think the thing that really elevates Skip and Loafer in general is just it is very much a character driven story, and it very much goes for that kind of coming of age angle where romance is just sort of an aspect. It's not like the focus.
Yeah.
It is a character story that just has romance elements in it.
Yeah, because it didn't really feel like a romance anime.
Not really, no.
It has some elements of it in there, but it doesn't really delve that deeply into it.
It's just it's romance in the sense of, in this setting there would be a romantic undercurrent with at least some people, and that's just something you would expect. And so they put it in because they're going for that coming of age type story where like romance is going to be an element of it inevitably. There's just no getting around it. So it ends up being just another aspect of the full picture, which is good because, you know, it's able to focus on these individual pieces. It definitely is like a very much a character relationship story, where I was constantly being surprised by the character writing in just every episode. My assumptions about characters were almost always wrong, in a good way. Sosuke is one of those male character leads who's just by his design, for me, I would have given it like a coin flip like chance of whether I even just like liked him or not, just like at like a baseline level. But my god, I fucking loved him. Like he was such a well-written character. He was so complex. Like the way his like emotions and like thoughts and like his perspective was written was so unique and human, and there was just so much there to like really take from it. Like it just it's just like it's one of those things where it's just they feel like fleshed out like human characters with their own thoughts and drives and, you know, perspectives, and like everyone has like the very like uniquely human feeling to them, where they're not just like a collection of personality traits. These are like people. And yeah, like even with some of like it's, you know, with some of its more like sort of like romanticized elements, like you still just feel that down to earthness just from everyone. And I think having Mitsumi be that key character really helps with that, because she is very down to earth in like the most literal way, coming from like a rural setting into like, you know, straight up Tokyo. We get that perspective from her, and like sort of that obviously, you know, that classic rural versus city life type dynamic that has definitely been done a lot. But like her perspective, and then relating that to the other characters, and just like the way that everyone's viewpoints, you know, come into play. It's just, I mean, it's just you can just tell it's just written by someone who just loves the characters they're writing, that they really believe. It's that kind of thing where you can tell like it's like the characters are living through the writing rather than being written.
It's a school slice of life anime, but it pretty much just goes against everything you would expect from the genre. Because when you think school slice of life, you're like, okay, it's gonna be like some cutesy comedy, it's gonna be like a rom-com. But this one just like, it goes completely against everything you'd ever expect from this kind of setting and these kind of characters in it. And it sort of works as like a drama, but it's also pretty like lighthearted also. Despite not using the usual anime writing for this setting, it still has enough content to fill up like every single episode with its own like unique style of character interactions, which is really impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive, because it really doesn't lose steam, because there's so many interesting little interactions, and the way that the chemistry differs between characters is so distinct, and once again very human, in the sense that, you know, some characters obviously act very different around certain people, and you can really gauge the way their relationships are based on like the way that they interact. There's like some character interactions where like those relationships change drastically over time in ways that are really really fascinating to me. I really liked the initial strife and then sort of the development between Sosuke and the drama club guy. They start out like very much at odds because of like Sosuke not wanting, because obviously like this theater film buff obviously knows about him, obviously, and knows about his past career as a child actor, and Sosuke obviously really is against people learning that. Something is very hard line on, and early on you can see like the hostility he feels. He immediately clocks this honestly like very earnest, maybe a little too pushy, but earnest person who really isn't trying to mean, they mean well. They're not trying to like obviously antagonize him, but he reflexively feels like he's being antagonized because of how little he wants this to come out and be a defining part of his person to the other people he's spending time with. And you just see that immediate hostility and like the tension between those two characters, and like seeing that, and then getting to the end where like Sosuke's reflecting on like how he should have walked up to Kanachika and told him that the play was really good, because like it really actually moved him, and he was afraid to like reach out and like actually have that interaction because of that conflict that had been going on between him, his inner conflict, which would then of course like stem out into the conflict that he has with Kanachika on that level, like seeing that develop, and of course seeing those like self-reflection moments, and Sosuke actually growing as a character as he interacts with people who really do want to understand him and want to have a strong relationship with him. Like that kind of development, that is the thing that Skip and Loafer is so good at, and is so consistently good at it the entire time. Like if we're talking about those kind of pairs, it's like those two, and then you've got like Mitsumi and like Egashira, right? Because like Egashira is like obviously like has that romantic feeling for Sosuke, and Mitsumi, who's like very earnest and like kind of in the half and half, like it's just sort of naturally getting that close relationship with Sosuke after they meet at the very beginning. Mitsumi and Egashira, they obviously end up bonding sort of like obtusely over time, and that like feeling of like Mitsubi being a rival to just like subsiding as they spend more time together. And also my favorite like unlikely friendship between Egashira and Nao-chan, which I really liked. They just dropped that out of nowhere, and just them just like being buddies who like communicate over like social media and stuff. I was like, that just like I was like, aw, like that's just like such like an unexpected little relationship. It's like I would not have expected that, and that's just what it's so good at. Is like it makes you think there's characters that would never interact, and then they do interact in ways that like really surprise you. It's surprising me in the way where like you can't always read what someone is thinking or doing, or like the way they have interactions with other people, like in that human element where we can't fully comprehend exactly what people are doing or thinking. Like it's that kind of unpredictability where it's like you think something of someone, and then you interact with them more, you learn more about them, and you realize that your preconceptions were completely wrong. Like Skip and Loafer like almost weaponizes that, but it's in a way where it just makes you really like the characters because of that complexity. Another thing is my favorite character relationship in the show, which Robbie brought up earlier, was Yuzu and Makoto, the popular girl and of course the unpopular girl pairing. And I love that because once again, it's another relationship where it starts with friction and conflict. Makoto is like not a very popular girl. She has that like unpopular girl like spitefulness towards people like Yuzu who naturally attract people. That unwillingness to sort of meet her halfway, and they have that conversation where Yuzu's like, hey, if you don't even want to like interact with me, it's all cool. You don't need to force yourself to interact with me for like Mitsumi's sake, because they were all hanging out together. And like that's such a good like start to that, because like there's that obvious friction between the two and their perspectives and their social perspectives, and then they just go on to like have this like incredibly just moving development into friendship together that just would constantly make me feel like emotional. My absolute favorite scene with them is during the festival where Makoto brings her friends and they meet up with Yuzu, and of course like Makoto's friends are built from very similar stuff.
They're like, what is this? Who is this? What are you doing?
Yeah, they also like shy away and they don't want to talk to this like obviously like naturally beautiful and popular like girl, and Makoto like senses that, and you can tell like obviously it doesn't like explicitly show or like indicate this, but you can tell that in her mind she's seeing herself through her friends. And just that moment where Makoto like starts talking about Yuzu and like drags them over to like her painting and starts explaining like the motive behind it, and like talking about her dog and everything, and like that scene made me cry, man. I fucking like I started streaming a little because like that was so beautiful to me. You can tell like these two people who were like completely at odds are now like lifelong friends, and you can tell how much Makoto values their friendship so much that she wants her friends to see that like Yuzu is like a really good person who just like should not be judged by the fact that she's just popular and beautiful. And in the same episode, we see the burden that Yuzu has from being popular and beautiful as guys come hitting on her the whole time.
She doesn't have a ton of friends.
Yeah, she's not like uber popular, but she's like she's like a
popular
dude
as in,
magnet.
Like she makes a good impression, but she doesn't really she struggled like making like close friends because of that as well.
Right. It's because Yuzu like you can tell immediately from when she like very quickly befriends Mitsumi that she wants real friendships that are not based on like any sort of hierarchy. And that's another thing that is incredibly reflective from her friendship with Makoto. It's like Yuzu's like conventionally beautiful, so like like during the festival like she wants like people to appreciate her painting, but all she gets are like guys coming up to hit on her.
Oh, that's a nice painting. They haven't even looked at it. Yeah,
they don't even look at it. They're just looking at her the entire time, and she's just like incredibly unamused. And that's a big thing. So much of the undercurrent is characters wanting to be understood and trying to reach out to each other and connect, even when it sort of seems like the odds are against them, because I mean human relationships are just like that. It's not always established by good rapport. Like sometimes a good relationship starts with a big negative experience, and it's just how you work through that experience that really defines what kind of relationship you'll have. And Skip and Loafer does that masterclass, never dropping the ball, always the right amount of drama but not too much, and really giving characters those situations to self-reflect and improve. It's this beautiful character-driven ecosystem that just it just lives and thrives on its own, and that's why it's so good.
Very nice, very cute art style.
The very like solid colors, like very pastel, sort of like adjacent, just very bright and vibrant. They really did a good job like adapting the way the character designs look in the manga. Like I haven't seen a PA Works show that has that kind of visual style. Like they really went for a more specialized look rather than like the sort of the normal like PA Work design that they do in a lot of their shows. Character-driven stories are always going to work on me. Like I am a character-driven person.
Absolutely.
That's just like good character writing will win me over faster than like anything. So Skip and Loafer just having that in droves from episode 1 and never like ever letting up on that. How could I even have any complaints for it? It was just a beautiful anime, and I just loved it. Loved every second of it.
And also, there's some drama, but it's not completely overblown. It's like pretty believable drama. It's not like lifelong grudges and all that.
The ending was really interesting. How they tackled that with Shima doing the performance and his mom showing up, and end up getting like kind of shoot off with the model girl kind of guilt tripping her into leaving. It's really bittersweet.
And it's just like periodic side characters who would show up that just like they would always have a reason or add some flavor. Like they were never like, there was no like haphazard placement of characters. Like everything always felt like it was in the right place.
We've only been doing these little podcasty things for like, what, 2 seasons, not including this one, right? So it probably doesn't mean that much to say this, but I'm pretty sure Tengoku Daimakyo was like my favorite show that I watched like since we started this, like by a lot. I don't know what I was expecting when I started this show, but I remember when it started out and I was watching this, I was like, this show, something's off about this show. This show's a little weird, but I can't quite put my finger on it. And then the further it goes on, the more I'm like, oh my god, this is just like an unending nightmare. It's always trying to hook you in by doing just this weird stuff. Like the characters, our main two characters are probably like the most normal people in this entire show, and everyone is like believable, but there's definitely a lot of like moral ambiguity going on in a lot of these episodes with just what's happening, and there's a lot to keep track of. It's throwing a whole lot of concepts at you in every single episode, introducing new stuff every episode, introducing new characters pretty frequently too. There's always new people coming into rotation. But it also, it bounces between the two different settings as well, because we have the two main characters traveling across Japan. And then we bounce back to Tengoku, which originally I was like, what the hell is even happening here? Like when it does the Tengoku segments and you don't really know what it's about, you're like, what is this? Like,
right. And of course it's on purpose. Yeah,
it's a bit like the Promised Neverland, like the same vibe.
It does have the orphanage vibe, but obviously it's angled a little differently, where obviously like the kids have like a certain degree of freedom beyond the fact that there's like a wall. It's not nearly as like egregious of a thing. Like they're sort of teased by the idea of there being an outside of the outside.
And then like all the way up until the end of the anime, you're just left wondering like, what are they doing here? What is the point of this like Tengoku thing? It's nothing here like makes sense. Like they're trying to raise these kids and they're like, they have no concept of gender, they have no concept of sexuality or any of this stuff, and it's like, why are they doing this? Like, what is the point?
That specific aspect reminded me a lot of Shinsekai Yori.
It reminded me of Darling in the Franxx.
Because like Shinsekai Yori had the whole thing where like they were also like they had powers, and they also had like they didn't really have like they had like a view on sexuality, but there was no like standard for it. So like there was a lot of like same-sex relationships that were also kind of fostered on purpose because they were trying not to reproduce. So, and then once again, there's that aspect of reproduction being sort of like a weird thing. But that part is definitely like Darling in the Franxx, though obviously executed much better. Yeah, I was like, I wasn't too surprised with the way the characters were, just because obviously I'm familiar with Ishiguro's work from Sorimachi, and Sorimachi is a very, once again, character-driven story, and he writes characters in a very unique way, because he has this perspective. Sorimachi, the setting is like in a market district, and from my understanding, Ishiguro like lived either in or very close to a very similar market district where he knew a lot of the locals, and like he knew like a very wide variety of personalities and people of all sorts of ages, and he was like very well acquainted with like a diverse amount of people, and Sorimachi is filled with that, where there's like no, like there are central characters, but like every character that shows up is like very distinct, and he's pulling a lot from like experiences with like people he knew in real life, and just like that idea, and like there's no like unevenness to the way he approaches characters, like whether they're going to be primary or side characters or even one-offs. Like he really approaches each character like he's really trying to write like a specific type of person, and incorporating them in this world. And that aspect of Sorimachi, where there was such a diverse cast of characters that would like cycle in and out around the central characters, and like giving it this like really well established illusion of like there being this very thriving district with all these like different sorts of unique types of people and like their perspectives and all that the way that kind of character writing philosophy transitioned into Tengoku Daimakyo, very much it transitioned very similarly. It just adapted to the setting and the premise more so, but it still has that same like every character feels like very distinct and alive, and like even if they're like one-offs or don't show up very often, like they have that impact because they are just like written in this very specific way, and that's one of his greatest writing strengths.
Another interesting way that this show is written is that they don't explain anything. The setting itself, just like the fact that it's like post-apocalyptic, but we don't know why. They have theories. It's like, oh, it was like maybe it was an alien invasion or something, which would seemingly make sense considering all the horrible alien monsters that are roaming around and stuff like that.
Tengoku Daimakyo is very much a subtle type of mystery where it does not explicitly explain a lot, and when it does, it's often as a misdirect. The obvious things are, to me, well, first off, the Tengoku stuff is taking place in the past. It's taking place before the disaster. And obviously, the Maru and Kiriko stuff is taking place after. They are happening in two distinct time periods. And we can sort of infer that whatever triggered the disaster probably stemmed from this Tengoku facility. Obviously, we already have precedent of them having like very strange powers. We've seen some of the characters that are like really off the shits to the point like some of them have just like completely departed from like having a corporeal form. And like there's like a big thing with that where it's like we're not really sure what the implication of that is. Yasser is like the big one because Yasser obviously like looked very different than everyone. Like definitely the most like non-human looking person in that entire setting. And then they sort of like they quote unquote die, but they don't seem like they really died. They sort of like just departed from their mortal flesh and have become some sort of like being. Yeah. And they, I'm almost certain like that is definitely important to a large extent to explaining these how the great disaster happened, and then there's the other thing which that the man eaters are primarily the kids from the facility. And then it's heavily implied that like the doctor and that like amputated girl are Shiro and Mimihime.
I like that they're not really, like you said before, there very few things are clearly explained, and they just kind of trust you to understand, which I enjoy. Like there's a lot of implications, and they just kind of, people are smart enough to understand this, and we'll just go with it. We don't need to have a huge exposition dump about what happened to this character and all
right. That. It very much is establishing itself as a mystery, and it's trusting its audience enough to try to examine the pieces and the bits and try to make sense of it. It's one of those. This is definitely one of those series where it's not like a one and done, or like you like rewatch or reread. Even as much context as we do at the end of the anime run, like. So much of the early events and things that happen, you gain so much more perspective and knowledge of that you are definitely going to notice and experience things that like were not nearly as clear before you had a good, like at least a foundational picture of sort of the situation that's going on.
And even with the sillier episodes, like the one with the bear, not a ton happens. Like even that has a purpose because when Maru tries to use his Maru touch, like his what was it called, fatal dive on the bear, it doesn't work. And then later it works on the girl. So we kind of see, okay, it works only on the Hiroko, the man-eaters, and the humans. It's like a hint at like, okay, what really are these things?
As far as like production IG goes, this is like one of the best things they've produced in a long time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like visually, especially, just like it looks gorgeous like the entire time. Obviously, there's like some like episodes that have like a little different animation style, like when they had like the trigger guest animators on the one with Juichi, because he was named after a number.
Yeah, he's number 11.
Number 11. He's number 11. Yeah, so is Juichi, because he was from the fucking female farm, whatever place.
Yeah, I thought it was funny when he told that story, and they're like, okay, this is just bullshit. You're just making this up. And then later it turns out it's true anyway.
Yeah, I liked the fake out of him having the fake tattoo and deliberately like having it kind of obvious that it's fake, but then concealing the real one. I thought that was a very clever little bit. And it also like made his character a little bit more interesting because like obviously like he's sort of trying to get by with his like tall tales, but he is like, it's obvious there are some things he's really actually pulling from truth, and in this world what's true and what's not is kind of muddled.
And like you, I didn't know about the Robin scene.
Yes,
I didn't.
I got spoiled on it.
I didn't know anything about it, and I was like, what? I was like,
I knew about it, so I was like, oh, okay, so how is this gonna play out?
Yeah, I just didn't know the context.
I'm worried. I'm worried.
I didn't know the context. I knew it would happen. I just didn't know when and why. But like when we got to the episode right before it, and you see Robin at the facility, I'm like, oh god, it's coming next episode, isn't it? It's very uncomfortable. But man, there's like a mix of things that are like really important that happen during that scene. Like we get that visual representation of like Kiriko not really being sure which person they are, right? Like she sees Haruki in the mirror, but like then also has that like obviously non-Haruki memory, which also sort of infers that Haruki's sister was being sexually abused by Robin.
Yeah. Oh my god.
So clearly there might have been some precedent to this. And once again, I mean, it's a big thing where it's like it breaks this hero worship thing that the Haruki side had for Robin, because like Robin was like this hero figure to him because he never saw any of this egregious shit that was probably happening in the background. He only saw Robin's heroism.
It happened so fast. It's like right after she meets him. It's like instantaneous. Like nothing ever happened, man.
Yeah, but
it's
like,
crazy.
You see that look on his face when he sees her, and he like looks fucking like horrified, like he's seeing a nightmare. Like
in one scene in the last episode, there's like a little flash where you see like a gun flaring up and like illuminating his face, which I guess could imply that he was maybe the one who shot Kiriko.
Oh man,
maybe? And that's why he's surprised.
That right, like, cause he would have thought that they were left for dead. Yeah, I mean that's not a bad theory. That actually does make sense. But yeah, Tengoku, it was a tough choice for me. It was really like neck and neck with Skippy Loafer. It was a tough choice, but Tengoku really like it was above and beyond in a lot of ways. So it was hard not to give it to it.